venture into solving the sheet. Just some more results on center of mass related to computation. Let me communicate. Did I tell you in an earlier session the center of mass of a uniform semicircular ring? Did I discuss that? Yes, 2r by pi. Then a uniform semicircular disk, 4r by 3 pi. Did I discuss that? Okay. Did I look into a hollow and a solid hemisphere? No. So let me look at the center of mass to begin with of a uniform hollow hemisphere. Uniform hollow hemisphere, right? Of mass m and radius r. Uniform hollow hemisphere of mass m and radius r. That means mass per unit volume m by 2/3 pi r cubed. Mass per unit volume m by 2/3 pi r cubed, right? Now, hemisphere with center O, radius R, and it's hollow. Now, what the whole thing revolves around finding suitable elements of the hemisphere. One thing for sure, if this is the line of symmetry, then the mass distribution you find to the right of this mass, of this line, is the mass distribution you find to the left of this line. And therefore, owing to symmetry considerations, the center of mass must lie on this. The center of mass must lie on this. We might choose to call this as the y direction and this as the origin, right? Now, what I want to be able to do is, I want to be able to select rings on the hemisphere of this kind. Rings on the hemisphere of this kind. Circular rings on the hemisphere of this kind. I hope you realize what I have done. Coaxial rings of this kind on the hemisphere is what I want to select. You know, when you look from the side, then you know these are the rings that I want to select on the hemisphere of varying radius, circular rings. Each of the circular rings would have its center of mass at its geometrical center, right? So what I would essentially do is, let's say this would be a sample ring. I'll take the y of this ring, which is also the y of the center of mass of this ring, because the center of mass of the ring would be at its geometrical center, into the mass of this element into y of this. I do that for all the rings. Y into the mass element, y into the mass element, and I sum it up, right? So that all rings are covered. And then I divide by the mass of the hemisphere. That's going to give me y of the hemisphere. Yes or no? I break the hemisphere into circular elements on the surface of this kind of varying radius, starting from radius equal to capital R to radius equal to 0, from the equator R to pole 0, right? And for every choice of this element, I take a y for the element into the mass of the element, y for the element into the mass of that element, and I sum it up, covering all the elements on the hemisphere, and then I divide by the total mass of the hemisphere, and that's going to give me the y of the hemisphere, which is hollow. Yes or no? Do you understand? All that I'm saying is, how's the center of mass calculated? The y of the center of mass is calculated as follows. I take y of every element, the y of the center of mass of an element of mass dm, and then I divide by the total mass. This is what I would do, right? So I break this hemisphere into rings of this kind. say this is an intermediate ring of radius small r, and its center of mass is at its geometrical center. That means this ring is located at y. So I take the y of this ring into the mass of this ring, and I do that for all the rings. For all the rings, I take the y into the mass element, y into the mass element, y into the mass element, and I sum it up by suitably selecting my variables so as to cover all the elements constituting the ring. And then I divide by the total mass of the hemisphere. That's going to give me y of the center of mass of the hemisphere. How's that? Right? That should then be the modality for this computation. Therefore, now let's say when you see the ring from the side, you see a strip. You see a rectangular strip is what you see, right? So this is one choice of ring. This is one choice of ring selected on the surface, right? And the way I locate this ring is with the help of this theta. This theta will suitably locate the ring for me. Realize that the ring on the equator would be theta equal to 0, and the ring on the pole would be theta equal to pi by 2, isn't it? So by varying theta from 0, where I cover the ring on the equator, to theta equal to pi by 2, where I cover the ring of 0 radius on the pole, I cover all rings. Yes or no? Just by varying theta from 0 to pi by 2, just by varying theta from 0 to pi by 2, I could cover all the rings that constitute this surface of the hemisphere. What do you say? Is that all right or not? Right? Now, so the first thing that I need to be doing is find the mass of this shaded portion into the y of the center of mass of the shaded portion, which is the geometrical center of this ring, and then I carry out a suitable integration by varying from theta equal to 0 to pi by 2, so that y into dm is summed up for all the rings that constitute this surface, and then divide by the total mass of the hemisphere. That's going to give me the y of the center of mass of the hemisphere. Is that all right or not? Right? Good. Now realize that if this is theta, this is also theta, right? And the radius of this ring, this particular ring, has radius small r equal to r cos theta, right? The radius of this ring is r cos theta, is the radius of this shaded portion, right? Can I remove this? The circumference of this shaded portion, the circumference of this ring is going to be 2 pi r cos theta would be the circumference of this ring. 2 pi r cos theta is the circumference of this ring. Now, just to avoid clutter in the same diagram, let me just draw one more thing separately for you. Now, this is theta, right? In order to model the thickness of the ring, this is the thickness of the ring. Theta varies by a very small amount. This is a thin ring. This is a very thin ring. So theta varies by a very small amount. Call it d theta, so that I could model the thickness of the ring. The thickness of the ring. So if this is r, then realize that this is the thickness. This arc is subtending an angle d theta at the center. So the length of this arc is going to be r d theta. Yes or no? The length of this arc is going to be r d theta. That's also the thickness of the shaded portion. Yes or no? Right. So circumference of the ring, which is 2 pi r cos theta, into r d theta, which is the thickness of the ring, will give me what? The area of the shaded portion. Right? One thing that I want to stand corrected, it's a hollow ring and hollow hemisphere, so we shouldn't be talking of mass per unit volume, we should be talking of mass per unit area. So if I wrote that rho at the very beginning, m by 2/3 pi r cube, that was a lapse of concentration from my end. Fix that. That rho is not relevant here because it's a hollow hemisphere. There is no mass in the inside of the hemisphere. The mass is distributed only on the surface of the hemisphere. So instead of talking of mass per unit volume, talk of mass per unit area distributed on the surface. So just stand corrected. I think I just had a lapse of concentration. So fix that. Rho is not relevant here, and that's not even the rho for the object. The surface charge density is mass divided by 2 pi r squared. Mass divided by 2 pi r squared is the mass per unit area distributed on the surface of the hemisphere. Fix that, please. That was a mistake that I made. Okay. m by 2 pi r squared. Now, okay, so circumference of the shaded portion into the thickness of the portion will give me what? Area of the shaded portion will give me the area of the shaded portion. Now, the mass of the shaded portion then would be into sigma, mass per unit area. Sigma, which is mass per unit area, will give me the mass of the shaded ring, right? Now the y coordinate of the center of mass of the ring, see, if this is theta, realize that the y of the center of mass of this portion is going to be r sine theta. That's y of the center of mass of the shaded portion, r sine theta, right? So the mass of the shaded portion into r sine theta, y of the shaded portion into the mass of the shaded portion into the y of its center of mass will give me the y into dm for this ring. I want to sum up all the y into dm's. I want to sum up all the y into dm's in order that I could cover all the rings starting from theta equal to 0 to theta equal to pi by 2. So I am going to carry out a summation of these y into dm's, which is done with the help of this operation. Theta runs from 0 to pi by 2 to give me all the y into dm's, and then I would divide by the total mass of the hemisphere. Then I would divide by the total mass of the hemisphere. Right? And that's going to give me the y of the center of mass of the hemisphere. That will give me y of the center of mass of the hemisphere. Right? Now sigma you can replace by m by 2 pi r squared, surface charge density, surface mass density, right? So when you plug in sigma equal to m by 2 pi r squared, everything else will come out. You will have something into sine theta, cos theta, d theta. Theta runs from 0 to pi by 2. This is the integral that you will encounter. Now based on an earlier discussion, this integral you know is function raised to the power 1 into the derivative of that function. That's going to be something into sine square theta by 2. Theta runs from 0 to pi by 2. So that will give you something into half kind of a thing. Yes or no? So that's the only integral that you will encounter while doing this calculation here, and the final result that you obtain out of this will turn out to be r by 2, a result that you want to remember. Y of the center of mass of a uniform hollow hemisphere, would be r by 2 along the line of symmetry, would be y equal to r by 2. That's the result that you would encounter. I mean, everything else is constant. 2 pi r cubed into sigma comes out, right? All that you're left with is sine theta, cos theta, d theta. So everything that has come out is here, and integrating this function raised to the power 1 into the derivative of the function to power n plus 1 by n plus 1, right? Towards the end of an earlier session I discussed this. That will give you a half, and then the final result will turn out to be r by 2. will get cancelled from the numerator and denominator, right? So a must remember result. So that's for a hollow hemisphere. Let's look at a uniform solid hemisphere. Why am I not talking of a hollow sphere? I don't have to talk of a hollow sphere because the geometrical center of the hollow sphere would be its center of mass if it's uniform. So I'm not talking of a sphere, I'm rather talking of a hemisphere. Okay, now let me talk of a solid hemisphere, uniform, and of mass capital M. Uniform solid hemisphere, mass M and radius R, and mass per unit volume. Now I can talk of mass per unit volume because there is mass at every point inside that region. So now I can talk of mass per unit volume as m by 2/3 pi r cubed. M by 2/3 pi r cubed. Yes or no? Mass per unit volume if it's uniform. Now again, when I talk of a solid hemisphere, solid hemisphere, again from symmetry, its y, its center of mass must lie along this line of symmetry, because the mass distribution seen to the right of this is the same as the mass distribution that you see to the left of it, right? And therefore you would expect the center of mass of the solid hemisphere to lie along this line of symmetry for sure, right? Again, the objective is to select suitable mass elements dm, to find the center of mass of each of these mass elements, y into dm, y into dm, y into dm. I carry out for all mass elements that constitute this hemisphere, solid hemisphere. I sum it up, and then I divide by the total mass. I want to sum it up in a manner that all elements of the hemisphere get covered, right? Now, this time my modus operandi for this selection will be a little different. See, it sometimes become very usefully critical to select your mass elements dm suitably, you know, with little bit of exposure, little bit of effort. You'll realize for different geometries, for different situations, what would be ideal for a choice of mass element. You know, what would make life easy for you. Any choice will do as long as it covers all the mass elements, but some choices will be superior compared to others, and therefore being judicious on this front will help. It's not about just being judicious, it's also about a little experience and a little exposure which you will get as we chug along, right? So now when I talk of a solid hemisphere, I'll tell you what. No, I will not. See, she says, nothing wrong about what you said. She said, we'll have these discs, you know. These are discs now, because, you know, now these are not rings, these are discs. These are discs. I could break it up into discs, and all discs get covered from theta equal to 0 to theta equal to pi by 2. I'll take the mass of this disc into y of the disc, mass of another disc into the y. I'll sum it up, divide by the total mass, and I can get the nothing wrong about it. It's good. Yes, that's a brilliant choice. This is right. This will work. This will work. Nothing wrong about it. But an easier and a convenient choice is I'll select a bunch of caps on top of each other of this kind, caps. Say this is a certain cap that I select which replicates a hollow hemisphere. This is like a hollow hemisphere, isn't it? This portion could be looked upon as a hollow hemisphere, the shaded portion, right? And its center of mass would be at half its radius from here. I do that for all such caps that constitute this solid hemisphere. See, this solid hemisphere could be looked upon as being constituted of these hollow hemispheres. Infinite number of these hollow hemispheres will constitute the solid hemisphere, placed on top of each other, continuously placed on top of each other without gaps, right? So starting from small r equal to 0 to small r equal to capital R, from small r equal to 0 to small r equal to capital R, I'll cover all the caps, all the hemispherical hollow caps that constitute this solid hemisphere. What do you say? Right? So this particular hemisphere, mass of this hemisphere into small r by 2 would be the y into dm for this hemisphere. And then I sum it up by varying small r from 0 to capital R. And then I divide by the total mass of the solid hemisphere. That's going to give me the y of the center of mass of the solid hemisphere. Yes or no? Right? Now, so one such hollow hemisphere is this shaded portion, and it's of radius small r and of thickness dr, small thickness, right? Now let me do the mass of this chosen element. Let me find out the mass of this. The center of mass of this chosen element will lie at r by 2 along the line of symmetry, right? Now let me look at the mass of this element. What's the surface area of this element? 2 pi r squared is the surface area of this element. Very good. 2 pi r squared is the surface area of this element. Into the thickness, what's the thickness? dr. Will give me what? The volume of the shaded element. Will give me the volume of the shaded element. Into the volume density will give me the mass. So into the volume density, which is this, will give me the mass of the shaded element. So this is my dm. This is my dm into the y of the center of mass of this element, which is r by 2. Will give me a y into dm. Will give me a y into dm for this element. Yes or no? Will give me a y into dm for this element. I want to do that for all elements starting from small r equal to 0 to small r equal to capital R. So I want to sum it up by varying small r from 0 to capital R and then divide by the total mass. So this is sum of all the y into dm's that constitute this solid hemisphere, right? Divide by the total mass m will give me y of the center of mass of the solid hemisphere. Yes or no? Now rho 2 pi can come out. When you integrate r cube, you get r to power 4 by 4, right? Easy to integrate. And when you plug in all of this, let me just tell you the final result that you'll get is 3r by 8. An important result to remember for a uniform solid hemisphere. At y equal to 3r by 8 is where the center of mass is located, is where the center of mass gets located. Clear? Sounds good? Now, for symmetric entities, you don't have to see. For rectangular entities, if you have to uniform rectangular lamina, suppose this is a uniform rectangular lamina, then the center of mass of a uniform rectangular lamina would be at its geometrical center, which is the intersection of the diagonals, which would be the intersection of the diagonals. For a square or a rectangle, this is this is what it's going to be, right? Now, in exactly the same way, you know, you could deal with right circular cones. I will not do all this for those entities. Let me just tell you the final result and tell you what you should be doing if you had a uniform right circular cone, hollow or solid, right? This is what you should be doing. If we had a uniform right circular cone, say if it is solid, then the way to deal with this is as you said, we could now break it up into parallel discs. We could break it up into parallel discs of this kind. The mass of this disk into the y. I do that for all the elements that constitute this disk, right? Starting from, let's say, if this was the y direction, starting from y equal to 0 to y equal to the height of the starting from y equal to 0 to y equal to h. If I take all these elements, mass of this element into the y of its center of mass, I do that for all elements by varying y from 0 all the way to h. I'll get the location of the, and divide by the total mass, I'm going to get the y of the center of mass of this right circular cone. Let me just give you the result here. The center of mass is h by 4 from the bottom and 3h by 4 therefore from the apex. H by 4 from the bottom. See, the bottom will be heavier. That's why it's closer to the, you know, the center of mass always has a proclivity towards the heavier regions. So it's closer to the heavier region, right? So that's for a uniform right circular cone that's solid. A triangular lamina would have its center of mass at its centroid. Point where the medians intersect would be the center of mass for a lamina. So some of these results you might want to remember. Did I tell you how to deal with entities where a certain mass is scooped out? Yes, sir. Let's say if I have a circular lamina and I remove a circular portion from it. Did I tell you that the center of mass has a certain property? If this is mass m1 located here, a mass m2 located here, and this is the center of mass, and if this was x1 and this was x2 and this was m3 located at x3, then m1 x1 from the left plus m2 x2 from the left must balance m3 x3 from the right. That means all the mi xi's on the left hand side must be equal in magnitude to all the mi xi's on the right hand side. I mentioned this result to you, right? Now let me take another instance. Now the next one is only an illustration. It's not supposed to be a result that you want to remember, but say I have a sheet of this kind. A sheet in which the bounding curves, these are the bounding curves of the sheet. The y for any given x here is kx squared. For any given x, this is the sheet. This is the sheet, right? Say this line is x equal to a. This is a bounding line. This is y equal to kx squared, and say this portion is y equal to minus kx squared. What it really means is the following. Say for example, on the upper bound curve, this is the upper bound curve, this is x equal to a. At any given x, the corresponding y that you get is kx squared. This is what it means, right? So that you know, for these are various x's starting from x equal to 0 to x equal to a. For each one of them you have the vertical line available, length of the ordinate available for any given x. So you exactly know how the sheet is profiled. This is the profiling of the sheet. Y equal to kx squared is the upper bound curve, y equal to minus kx squared is the lower bound curve, right? That means on the lower bound, for any given x, for any given x, the y would be minus kx squared, which would be in magnitude same as kx squared. That means if this is kx squared in length, this is also kx squared in length, but with a negative sign if the y coordinate has to be dealt with. Right? So let me talk in terms of a lamina of this kind, uniform thickness, uniform lamina. I want to be able to deal with this. I want to be able to deal with this. And say sigma is the mass per unit. When we talk of a lamina, we talk of mass per unit area on the lamina. That means if you cut 1 unit area out of it, it will weigh sigma kilograms. That's what it means, mass per unit area. Right? And again, uniform. Let me find out the location of the center of mass of such a lamina. Center of mass of such a lamina. Clear? Now again, from symmetry. This is the line of symmetry for this lamina. Right? So the center of mass must lie on the x-axis. Yes or no? The center of mass must lie on the x-axis. Y of the center of mass must be 0. Y of the center of mass must be 0. If it lies on the x-axis, the y of the center of mass must be 0 in this case. So I don't have to find y. I have to find the x coordinate of the center of mass of this structure. Uniform thin lamina. Let's deal with it. Okay? Have you understood the problem? Good. Now, again, what I do is I select elements of this kind. These elements. This is an element located at a distance x. That means its x coordinate of this element is x and is of thickness dx. This element is of thickness dx. This is an element that I select. Right? And the center of mass of this element is at x, because you know this and this are identical. So the center of mass of this shaded element would be at x, where this element is located. So I do in order to find the x coordinate of the center of mass of this structure, what is it that I would do? I would take the mass of this into the x of this, mass of this into the x of this. I'll do that for all these parallel strips. I'll do that for all these parallel strips starting from x equal to 0 to x equal to a to cover the entire lamina. Right? And then I divide by the total mass of that. Right? That will give me the x coordinate of the center of mass of this profile. Clear? Is that okay or not okay? Very good. Now, see, this is kx squared in length. This is also kx squared in length. Right? Now, let's say sigma is the mass per unit area on the lamina. Okay. Now, what is this total length? 2kx squared. What's the thickness? Dx. So this is roughly rectangular, right? So the area of this shaded strip, is 2kx squared into dx is the area of the shaded strip. Yes or no? Into sigma will give me the mass of the shaded strip. The x coordinate of its center of mass is x only, where the strip is located, into x. So this is x into dm. I'll do a x into dm for all x's starting from x equal to 0 to x equal to a. X into dm, starting from x equal to 0 to x equal to a. Right? Now, divided by the total mass. The total mass, no. See, the mass is not given. So what I'll do is, again, to find the mass, I'll take this strip, which is 2kx squared is the length of the strip, into dx is the thickness of the strip. That's the mass of the strip. And to sum up all of this, starting from x equal to 0 to x equal to a, will give me the total mass into sigma. See, this is the area. 2kx squared into dx is the area of the shaded strip. Length of the shaded strip into the thickness. So area of the shaded strip into mass per unit area will give me the mass of the shaded strip. The total mass would be sum of all these mass elements starting from x equal to 0 to x equal to a, and that's going to give me the x coordinate of the center of mass of this lamina.
So mass per unit area is already given.
No, natak kar rahe hain apan. We are only pretending that we know sigma, because it doesn't matter. See, sigma will get cancelled. It's a constant, it will get cancelled, right? It's not given, right? So sigma anyways gets cancelled from the numerator and denominator. Being a constant, it will scoop out of the integral and take care of each other in the numerator and denominator. 2k also is a constant, will get cancelled. Realize that this then boils down to integral x cubed dx. X runs from 0 to a, divided by x squared dx. X runs from 0 to a. That will give me the x coordinate of the center of mass of the system, right? Integrate x cube, x power 4 by 4. So a power 4 by 4 divided by a power 3 by 3. So that makes it 3a by 4. That makes it 3a by 4. How's that? Right? Can I wipe this off? Say I have a rectangular lamina of this kind. So this is a rectangular lamina of width r and of length 2r. Uniform rectangular lamina. Right? Now, where will be the center of mass of a lamina of this kind? Intersection of its diagonals. That will be the center of mass of this lamina, intersection of the diagonals. Now what I do is, from this lamina, I remove a semicircular disc. From this lamina, I remove a semicircular disc as follows. So that this is the leftover mass. The shaded portion is the leftover mass. This is semicircular disc removed. This is the, what you see in the shaded portion is the mass left. Okay. Now for this portion, now what you see, I want to find the location of the center of mass. I now want to find the location of the center of mass of the leftover portion, Once you remove this semicircular disc from this, I want to find the center of mass of the remaining portion, that means the shaded portion that you see here. Is that okay or not okay? Now, look again from symmetry. from symmetry. This is the line of symmetry even after removal. So the center of mass of the remaining portion must lie somewhere here only. Yes or no? This is say x equal to 0. Say this is the x-axis. Now, as far as the semicircular portion is concerned, just the semicircular disk that is concerned, this was O, this was O. The center of mass of this was lying where? At x equal to 4r by 3 pi for a semicircular disk. No? That was the center of mass of this semicircular disk that you have removed. That's the x coordinate of the center of mass of the semicircular disk that you have removed. 4r by 3 pi. Yes or no? Right. And for the original rectangle that there was, this was the original rectangle. This is x equal to 0. Halfway here, that means at x equal to r by 2 was the small r, no? I've used small r, so just say small r. At x equal to r by 2 was the center of mass of the original rectangular lamina. Yes or no? I want to find the x coordinate of the center of mass of this arrangement. Now again, if you remember, if the mass of this was m1, right, and the mass of this was m2, right, then the mass of the remaining was m1 minus m2, m1 minus m2. Did I tell you then that the x coordinate of the center of mass of the remaining is going to m1 into this, let's say this is x1 and this is x2. m1 x1, the original structure from which a mass m2 is removed, so minus m2 x2 divided by m1 minus m2. That's the x coordinate of the center of mass of the remaining portion. That means this portion, x of the center of mass of the remaining portion, will be somewhere here. Is it not? Right? Now, these masses, you know, these masses will be proportional to these areas because they have the same thickness. So the masses can be replaced by the corresponding areas. Is it not? Right? So, for the original rectangle, this mass m1 was 2r squared. The mass m1 was 2r into r, proportional to the area, which is 2r squared. I can replace. So x coordinate of the center of mass of the remaining was, say this is 2r squared. All the masses replaced by the corresponding areas. Right? I hope you understand the legality of that, right? 2r squared into the x coordinate of the center of mass of the mother portion, which is r by 2, which is r by 2, r by 2 minus the x coordinate of mass of this. Now mass of this will be proportional to the area of this. What's the area of this? Half pi r squared. So area into x2. So minus half pi r squared into the x coordinate of the center of mass of the removed portion, which is 4r by 3 pi, divided by, instead of saying m1 minus m2, I could say a1 minus a2, which is 2r squared minus half pi r squared. That will give you the x coordinate of the center of mass of the remaining portion. This is how you could locate that. Tell me where the confusion. Why minus 4r by 3 pi? No, everything measured from here positive. Is that fine? Clear? In fact, when we were kids in class 9, 10. That's not the way we calculated things here. The way we did this calculation was the MIXI principle, right? In the sense, how we did that when we were students of the secondary section. See, the rectangle had its center of mass at r by 2. At r by 2. Right? The whole rectangle, mass, let's say capital M, mass capital M, had it at x equal to r by 2. What was removed was, that means the semicircular portion, C1, had its center of mass at 4r by 3 pi. Now, see, if you remove a portion from here, the center of mass, instead of being at O, it will shift leftwards, because this will now become heavier, right? So the center of mass of the remaining portion will shift to C2. It was, the center of mass was originally O, but if you remove this portion, it will shift leftwards, and this becomes the center of mass of the remaining portion. So this is remaining portion, this is the cutout portion, and this remaining and cutout together have their center of mass at O. Yes or no? Yes. Right? So this is as if there is a mass which is the mass of the remaining portion, which is proportional to the area of the remaining portion, right? At C2, you have mass of the remaining portion, which is, let's say, proportional to the area of the remaining portion, which is 2r squared minus half pi r squared, will be proportional to the mass at C2, which is the remaining portion. At O, the mass is proportional to 2r squared, the area of the bigger rectangle, right? Original unchanged rectangle. And C1, the circular portion, which is simply half pi r squared, right? So now these two masses together have their center of mass at O, isn't it? They are constituent masses. The leftover portion and the cutout portion together have their center of mass at O, isn't it? Therefore, it's as if there is a mass proportional to this at C2, a mass proportional to this at C1, and realize that this was 4r by 3 pi, and this was r by 2. Therefore, this is 4r by 3 pi minus r by 2 is this, and this I need to calculate how much it shifts to the left. Say x naught is the amount by which it shifts leftwards. So then this mass into x naught must be this mass into this length. Can I say that? Right? So then this mass, which is 2r squared minus half of pi r squared, into the amount by which it shifts to the left. It shifts by an amount x naught to the left, and that must be the mass of this, which is proportional to half pi r squared, into this length, which is 4r by 3 pi minus r by 2. Sorry, this is r by 2 minus 4r by 3 pi. Right. Thank you. Right. They are the constituents of C1 and C2. C1 and the entire rectangle is made of what's remaining and what's cut out. And together, if you fix them, then their center of mass would be at O, isn't it? What you have removed, now you place here, that'll give you the bigger rectangle whose center of mass will be O, isn't it? That's why. No. I'll let it go today. Clear? So that'll give you the shift. That'll give you the shift from the original center, right? It'll not, what we calculated was x from here, the entity that we obtained, but now this equation will give you the shift from the original center by an amount x naught. Clear? Can I wipe this off? So this was a brief outing on the computational procedures involved in center of mass. These are the basic elements. It's not that it's enough to know this, but enough for you to be able to arrive at new things if required. These are the basic elements, the constituents of the computation. So keep tab on this. Now one fact which again as a discussion related to center of mass that I want to communicate to you is say if there is a mass m1 and there is a mass m2, right? And say v1 is the velocity of this and v2 is the velocity of this, right? Then the center of mass will have a velocity vcm given by m1 v1 plus m2 v2 by m1 plus m2 will give you the velocity of the center of mass of this two particle system. Velocity of the center of mass of this two particle system, right? As seen by a ground observer, say. Okay. Now, if there is an observer sitting at the center of mass, then the velocity of m1 as seen by an observer on the center of mass will not be v1. What will it be? v1 minus vcm will be the velocity. So in the center of mass frame, this is a center of mass frame where the observation is made from the center of mass, right? This particle m1 will not have a velocity v1 but will have a velocity v1 minus vcm. If the center of mass has a velocity 5 meters per second and v1 has a velocity 10 let's say 100 meters per second, then what would be the velocity of 1 as seen by the center of mass? 95 meters per second, isn't it? v1 minus v2. Yes or no? Yes, sir. So, oops, sorry. So in the center of mass frame, the velocity of m1 will not be reported as v1 as in the center of mass observer frame. It's going to be v1 minus vcm. This is mass m2. Again, it will not have a velocity v2. It's going to have a velocity v2 minus vcm. Right? Now, the kinetic energy in the ground frame of this system is going to be half m1 v1 squared plus half m2 v2 squared would be the kinetic energy in the ground frame. But let's obtain the kinetic energy of a two particle system in the center of mass frame. The kinetic energy of a two particle system in the center of mass frame. So now the kinetic energy in the center of mass frame of the two particle system is going to be half m1 v1 minus vcm whole square plus half m2 into v2 minus vcm whole square would be the kinetic energy in the center of mass frame. Yes or no? Right? Now notice v1 minus vcm is like a v1 minus m1 v1 plus m2 v2 by m1 plus m2, right? Now when I add m1 v1 will get cancelled. I have m2 into v1 minus v2 by m1 plus m2. This is what I get. See, m1 v1 gets cancelled. m2 v1 minus m2 v2 is this? That's v1? Yes or no? Right? Which is to say that this is half m1 into v1 minus vcm whole squared is going to be m2 squared into v1 minus v2 whole squared divided by m1 plus m2 whole squared. Yes or no? Right? v1 minus vcm whole squared. This one, the second term now, is half. Similarly, you just change m1 by m2 and v2 by v1, you get the corresponding result for this. Right? This can be obtained from this by simply replacing m2 by m1 and m1 by m2 and v1 by v2 and v2 by v1. That's all that you want to do here, isn't it? So then, confused kya? No, don't worry. This is going to be m1 squared m2 into v1 minus v2 whole squared, whether it's v2 minus v1 whole squared or v1 minus v2 whole squared, divided by m1 plus m2 whole squared. If you don't like it this way, then don't worry. Take to a more longish procedure. Take a v2 and v2 minus m1 v1 plus m2 v2 by m1 plus m2. You will get m2 into v2 m1 into v2 minus v1 by m1 plus m2, which you can plug into this and perform the last rights. We've still not performed. Okay. Now, in this equation then, I choose to do the following. Half m1 m2 into v1 minus v2 whole squared into m1 plus m2 by m1 plus m2 whole squared. What do you say? Right? This will get cancelled. So kinetic energy in the center of mass frame then turns out to be half of m1 m2 by m1 plus m2 into. Now v1 minus v2 is what? Relative velocity between the two masses. Is the relative velocity between the two masses? Yes or no? Right? v1 minus v2 is the relative velocity of the two masses. vrel. Relative velocity of the two masses. So this is half of m1 m2 by m1 plus m2 into vrel squared. vrel squared. Now, too early to talk too much about it, but this entity m1 m2 by m1 plus m2 for a two particle system is called the reduced mass of the system, is referred to as the reduced mass of the system, and we commonly designate it by the symbol mu. It's less than m1, this number is also less than m2 and is called the reduced mass of the system, referred to as mu. Mu is the reduced mass of a two particle system, and this turns out to be half of mu into vrel squared. Half of mu into vrel squared is the kinetic energy of a two particle system in the center of mass frame, where vrel is the relative velocity between the two masses, mu is the reduced mass of the two particle system, m1 m2 by m1 plus m2. Right? Sounds good?